The baby wouldn't stop crying. Not in the quiet way babies usually cry. This one sounded desperate. Like something was wrong. Very wrong. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst through my chest. Across from me, the front door was wide open. The wind pushed it back and forth. Creak. Creak. And the nanny. She was on the floor. Not moving. Hello? My voice came out small. Weak. No answer. Just the baby. Crying harder now. I rushed forward, nearly slipping, my breath catching when I saw the faint bruise forming on the nanny's temple. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's when I noticed it. The crib. Empty. But how did I go from a girl who couldn't even take care of herself to being responsible for a child someone was willing to fight for? My name is Ilara Dane, and for most of my life the only thing I was good at was being seen. Just not for who I really was. I grew up in a house where silence was expensive. Not peaceful silence, the kind that echoes through marble floors and glass walls, reminding you that even though everything looks perfect, something is missing. My father, Dominic Dane, was the kind of man people stood up for when he entered a room. Tech, billionaire, media darling, future mayor, if his campaign team had anything to say about it. To the world he was powerful, to me he was unavailable. After my mother left when I was 6, he didn't replace her. He replaced the feeling. With money. With distractions. With different women who came and went so often I stopped remembering their names. And me? I became convenient. If I wanted something, I got it. If I needed something, that was a different story. At school, I was never alone. But I was never really with anyone either. Ellie. We're going to that rooftop party tonight. You're coming, right? Only if you bring that VIP access thing again. Oh, and can you ask your dad about that internship? Requests. Favors. Smiles that lasted just long enough to get what they wanted. I played along. Because being surrounded by fake people still felt better than being alone. The only person who didn't treat me like a walking opportunity was Corvin Hale. My neighbor. My unofficial therapist. And the only person who had the guts to call me out. You know they're using you, right? He said one afternoon, tossing a soda can into the bin. I rolled my eyes. And you know I don't care, right? You do care, he shot back. You just don't want to admit you're lonely. I hated how accurate he was. So what do you want me to do? I snapped. Sit at home and journal my feelings? No, he shrugged. Just stop pretending you're okay with being surrounded by people who don't actually see you. That word again. Seen. Funny how I had thousands of followers online, and still felt invisible where it mattered. It was supposed to be my last carefree summer before everything changed. Before responsibilities. Before expectations. Before reality caught up with me. So I did what I always did when I felt something uncomfortable creeping in. I made a reckless decision. I'm inviting everyone, I told Corvin, scrolling through my contacts. To what? A concert. Private section. This weekend. He stared at me. You don't even have tickets. I smiled. I have something better. That something better was my father. Or more specifically, his money. Later that afternoon I walked straight into one of his meetings without knocking. Dad, I stopped mid-sentence. Because for once he wasn't the most interesting person in the room. Someone else was. A man standing beside the presentation screen. Calm and focused. Completely uninterested in me. Dark hair slightly messy, sleeves rolled up, voice steady as he explained something about education systems and access inequality. This platform isn't about profit, he was saying. It's about giving kids who've been overlooked a real chance. I blinked. People actually talked like that? My father leaned back in his chair. Impressive. Give me a number. I'll acquire it. The man didn't hesitate. I'm not selling. The room went still. I actually leaned forward. Wait, what? No one's offering to buy your idea, my dad said calmly. I'm offering to scale it. I'm looking for a partner, the man replied. Not an owner. That was the moment. The exact moment something shifted in my mind. Because I had just witnessed something I'd never seen before in my entire life. Someone who said no. To power. To money. To my father. And just like that, I was interested. Hello there, quick pause. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people, or like you had to offer something just to be valued, then this story is going to hit differently. Make sure you subscribe to Moments and Meanings by Anne, because stories like this, they don't just entertain, they stay with you. Now let's continue. I found out his name later that night, Alaric Venn, self-made and brilliant, and completely unimpressed by people like me, which, unfortunately for him, made me want his attention even more. And I had no idea that chasing that one person would lead me straight into the most life-changing mistake of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about Alaric Venn. Not in the shallow, he's attractive kind of way I was used to. It was different. Annoying, actually. The more he ignored me, the more it bothered me. People didn't ignore me. They hovered. They chased. They asked. But him? He barely spared me a glance. So, naturally, I did what any emotionally unbalanced, attention-deprived 18-year-old with unlimited resources would do. I made him impossible to avoid. I found out where he usually worked, where he grabbed coffee, even the park he jogged in most mornings. The first time I ran into him, I nearly tripped over my own plan. Literally. I showed up in workout clothes I had never worn before, pretending to jog, and within 30 seconds I was out of breath and questioning all my life choices. He noticed. Of course he did. "You don't run," he said, not even slowing down. "I do," I insisted, trying to match his pace and failing miserably. "Just, not fast." He gave me a look, one of those quiet, observant looks that made you feel like he could see right through you, and kept going. No flirting. No interest. Nothing. And somehow, that made me want to try harder. Over the next few days I kept showing up. Coffee shop, office lobby, charity event. Each time I found a reason to be there. Each time he found a way to stay just out of reach. It was frustrating in a way I had never experienced before. Corvin noticed immediately. "You're spiraling," he said one evening as we sat on the curb outside my house. "I'm not spiraling," I shot back. "I'm exploring a challenge." He laughed. "You don't even like challenges. You like shortcuts." I didn't respond, because for once, I wasn't sure he was wrong. But I didn't have time to sit and analyze my feelings. Not when I had already set something bigger in motion. The concert. I had invited almost everyone from school, promised them an experience they couldn't get anywhere else. The only problem? The tickets were sold out weeks ago, which meant I needed my father. Walking into his office again felt different this time. Not because of him, but because I knew who I was really there for. Alaric was there too, reviewing something on his tablet. He didn't look up when I entered. "Dad, I need access to the private section for this weekend's concert," I said quickly. "It's important." My father barely glanced at me. "We're in the middle of something." I should have pushed. Normally, I would have. But before I could speak again, Alaric did. "You don't need to buy people to stay around you," he said calmly, still not looking at me. The words landed harder than they should have. "Excuse me?" I snapped. Now he looked up. "If they wouldn't come without the perks, they're not really there for you." Silence filled the room. My father didn't intervene. He rarely did. I forced a laugh. "That's a very philosophical take for someone who clearly doesn't understand how my world works." "Maybe," he said, standing up. "Or maybe I understand it better than you think." Then he walked out, just like that, leaving me standing there with something unfamiliar twisting in my chest. I got the tickets anyway. Of course I did. The concert was exactly what everyone expected. Loud, exclusive, unforgettable. People surrounded me, laughing, thanking me, tagging me in videos, calling me the best. But for the first time it felt hollow. I kept thinking about what he said. About how easily he dismissed everything I thought mattered. And I hated that a small part of me wondered if he was right. That thought followed me home. It lingered the next morning. And it was still there later that week, when everything changed. It happened on my father's birthday. His annual event was less of a celebration and more of a strategic gathering. Business partners, media, influential guests. And every year he funded one major project to boost his image. This time I had an idea. Or at least, something that looked like one. I spent days researching, with Corvin's help, putting together a proposal for an education initiative. Something that would sound meaningful enough to impress Alaric. I didn't tell anyone my real reason. Not even myself. When I presented it that evening, it worked. People nodded. They were impressed. Even my father seemed interested. But the only reaction I cared about was his. "I didn't expect that from you," Alaric said quietly after the presentation. "Most people don't," I replied, trying to sound confident. Maybe they should start. For the first time, there was something different in his expression. Not admiration. Not quite. But acknowledgement. It should have felt like a win. And then the doorbell rang. At first, no one paid attention. Events like this always had interruptions. Staff moving in and out. Deliveries, late guests. But this one was different. The security guard walked in holding a large box. Confused. "This was left at the gate," he said. "No name. No note." My father frowned. "Open it." Someone brought it to the center of the room. The music softened. Conversations quieted. I don't know why. Like instinct was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. The lid lifted slowly. And then, a sound. Soft. Fragile. A cry. At first, no one reacted. It didn't make sense. It didn't fit. But then it came again. Louder this time. And suddenly the entire room shifted. "Is that?" Someone whispered. I stepped closer before I even realized I was moving. And then I saw it. A baby, wrapped in a thin blanket, tiny hands trembling, face red from crying. For a second I couldn't breathe. The room erupted into confusion. Voices overlapping. Questions flying. Cameras flashing. My father immediately stepped back, already reaching for his phone. "Handle this," he said sharply to one of the staff. Quietly. Of course. Quietly. Like everything else. Like problems could just disappear if you threw enough money at them. I should have walked away. I should have let the staff deal with it. That's what I always did. That's what everyone expected me to do. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the baby cried. Or maybe it was the way no one else stepped forward. Either way, I did. I reached into the box, hesitating for just a second before lifting him into my arms. He was lighter than I expected. Fragile. Warm. Real. The crying didn't stop, but it changed. Softer now, like he could feel he wasn't alone anymore. "Just give him to the staff," my father said impatiently. "They'll handle it." I looked at him, then at the baby, then back at him. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't do what I was told. "I'll take care of him." The words surprised even me. The room went silent again. And then Alaric spoke. "You don't even know what that means." I tightened my hold on the baby, something protective rising in my chest. "Then I'll figure it out." He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "This isn't a game." "I know," I said. But deep down, I wasn't sure I did. Because in that moment, holding that child in my arms, I had no idea that this wasn't just the beginning of a challenge. It was the beginning of a truth that would unravel everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. The first night was a disaster. There's no softer way to describe it. I had always believed I could handle anything as long as I stayed calm, stayed composed, stayed in control. But there is nothing controlled about a crying baby at 2 a.m. when you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. The sound filled the room, sharp and relentless, bouncing off the walls of Alaric's penthouse, like it was accusing me of something I couldn't yet understand. I stood there, holding him awkwardly, shifting from one foot to the other, whispering things that didn't even make sense. "Hey, it's okay, I've got you." Except I didn't. Not really. I had no clue what he needed. Food? Sleep? Comfort? I tried rocking him. Nothing. I tried humming. That made it worse. At one point, I just stared at him in complete helplessness and muttered, "You're tiny, but you're ruining my entire life right now." He responded by crying even louder. Alaric didn't come to help. That was the worst part. He had made it very clear before going to bed that this was my responsibility. My challenge. My decision. And he was going to hold me to it. The only thing he left me with was a list. A detailed, almost intimidating list of instructions written in his precise handwriting. Feeding schedule, temperature guidelines, sleep cycles, even notes about how long the baby should be held upright after feeding. It felt less like guidance and more like a test I was destined to fail. By the time I managed to feed him, after spilling formula on myself twice, and nearly giving up completely, he finally quieted down. The silence that followed felt unreal, like the world had paused just long enough for me to catch my breath. I sank into the couch, the baby resting against my chest, his tiny fingers curled around nothing. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something shift. Not panic. Not frustration. Something softer. Something unfamiliar. Then, he burped. Loudly. And just like that, the moment was gone. The next morning, I looked like a completely different person. My hair was a mess, my eyes were heavy, and there was dried formula on my shirt that I hadn't even noticed. Corvin showed up unannounced, took one look at me, and burst out laughing. "Wow," he said, stepping inside. "You look like life hit you with a truck." "That's because it did," I muttered, handing him the baby without hesitation. "Hold him. I need 5 minutes where no one is crying or depending on me." Corvin raised an eyebrow but took the baby anyway, surprisingly natural at it. "You know you can still back out, right?" he said after a moment. "Let your dad handle it." I shook my head immediately. "No." "Why not?" he pressed. "Because," I stopped. The real answer sat somewhere deeper than I was ready to admit. "Because I said I'd do it." That was the only explanation I gave. The days that followed blurred together in a way that made time feel meaningless. Feedings. Diapers. Crying. Repeat. Over and over again. There was no schedule that worked perfectly, no moment where I suddenly felt like I knew what I was doing. Every small success felt like luck. Every mistake felt like proof that Alaric was right about me. And he didn't make it easier. If anything, he made it worse. He watched everything. Not in an obvious way, but I could feel it. The quiet corrections. The raised eyebrow when I did something wrong. The subtle disapproval in his voice when I didn't follow instructions exactly. "That's not the right temperature," he said one evening, checking the bottle before handing it back to me. "It's fine," I argued weakly. "It's not fine," he replied. "Details matter." I clenched my jaw but didn't respond. Because deep down I knew he wasn't wrong. Still, there were moments. Small ones. Moments where things didn't feel like a constant struggle. Like the time the baby, who I had started calling Nico without even realizing it, gripped my finger and refused to let go. Or the way he quieted down faster when I held him instead of anyone else. Or the strange sense of peace that came from watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Those moments didn't erase the exhaustion. But they changed something. They changed me. Alaric noticed it too. He didn't say it outright, but his tone shifted. Slightly softer, slightly less critical. One evening, he came home earlier than usual and found me in the kitchen, trying to prepare a bottle while Nico cried in his crib. Without a word, he stepped in, picked the baby up, and calmed him with an ease that made me both impressed and annoyed. "Show off," I muttered. He almost smiled. "You're improving," he said instead. It wasn't praise. Not exactly. But it was enough to make my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. And that's when the doubts started creeping in. Not about the baby, about everything else. Corvin had become distant. At first I blamed it on timing. He said he was busy. Something about a project. Then it was calls he wouldn't answer. Messages left on read. Visits cut short with vague excuses. It didn't make sense. He had always been there. Always steady. Always honest. Until now. One afternoon, I finally confronted him. "What's going on with you?" I asked, watching him carefully. He avoided my gaze. "Nothing." "Don't do that," I said sharply. "Don't give me nothing." "You've been acting weird for days." He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. "It's just stuff," he said. "I'll tell you later." "Later when?" I pressed. He didn't answer. Instead, he checked his phone, his expression tightening slightly before he slipped it back into his pocket. "I have to go," he said quickly. Wait, but he was already heading for the door. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. The tension followed me into the next few days. It sat in the back of my mind, growing louder with every unanswered question. And then, something else happened. Something that didn't just feel off, it felt wrong. It started small. A phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice. Older. Sharp. You're the girl with the baby. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? I asked carefully. Another pause. Then a quiet, unsettling response. You shouldn't have him. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. For a long moment, I didn't move. Didn't think. Didn't breathe properly. Then Nico started crying again, pulling me back into reality. I picked him up instinctively, holding him closer than usual, my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. Who was that? How did they know about him? And why did it feel like this wasn't random? That night, I told Alaric. He didn't brush it off, which scared me more. Did they say anything else? He asked, his expression unreadable. No, I said. Just that I shouldn't have him. Silence stretched between us. Then he exhaled slowly. We need to be careful. Careful of what? I demanded. He looked at me. Really looked this time. We don't know who left him, he said. Or why. And suddenly, this didn't feel like a challenge anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Something bigger. Something hidden. And for the first time since that night at the party, I realized this baby didn't just bring responsibility into my life. He brought questions. Danger. And a truth that was getting closer to the surface, whether I was ready for it or not. After that phone call, nothing felt safe anymore. Not my father's house. Not Alaric's calm silence. Not even the walls of the penthouse where Nico now spent most of his time sleeping. Because silence started to feel like preparation for something. I began noticing things I had ignored before. The black car that passed the building twice a day and never stopped. The way security logs were suddenly tighter. The way Alaric's laptop was always angled away from view when I walked in. And Corvin. Corvin had completely disappeared. At first I told myself he was just avoiding me. Then I realized he wasn't avoiding me. He was avoiding this. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until Alaric left his office and slipped inside. I didn't know what I was looking for. Proof. Answers. Something that explained why a baby left in a box had suddenly turned my entire life into a locked room. His laptop was still open. For a second, I hesitated. Then I saw a file name that made my stomach drop. Nico. Origin trace. My hands froze. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Inside were documents. Reports. Photos. Financial transfers. Surveillance fragments. And one line repeated across multiple pages like a warning. Target infant. High-value lineage. My breath caught. Lineage? This wasn't abandonment. This was selection. A door slammed somewhere in the apartment. I quickly backed away from the desk just as Alaric walked in. He saw my face, and immediately knew. You went through it, he said quietly. I didn't deny it. What is this? He stared at me for a long moment, like he was deciding how much truth I could survive. Then he finally said, that child wasn't left behind. He was placed. My chest tightened. Placed by who? Alaric's expression darkened slightly. People who don't make mistakes when they choose bloodlines. The words didn't make sense. Until they did. And when they did, they felt like ice spreading through my veins. Before I could respond, Nico started crying from the other room. But this time, it sounded different. Not hungry. Not tired. Disturbed. Like he could feel something shifting around him. Alaric shut the laptop. Someone is coming for him, he said. And then, after a pause, and they won't stop. That was the night everything stopped being hidden. Alaric moved security to the penthouse immediately. Corvin finally resurfaced, but not as himself. He came in with a bruise along his jaw and eyes that didn't meet mine. They know I've been helping you, he said quietly. My stomach dropped. Helping me with what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Nico, and then said something I wasn't prepared for. Do you know what his name is? I frowned. His name is Nico. Corvin shook his head slightly. No, he said. That's what you named him. A pause. Then, he already had a name. The room went cold. Alaric stepped forward. Say it, Corvin swallowed. And said. Nicoli Ven. My world tilted. Ven. Alaric's last name. I turned slowly toward him. You said you didn't know anything about this, I whispered. Alaric didn't answer immediately. For the first time since I met him, he looked uncertain. Then he said, I didn't say I didn't know. I said I wasn't sure who I could trust. That was the moment I realized. Nico wasn't random. He wasn't abandoned. He was connected. To Alaric. To something bigger than all of us. And I had been holding him like he was just a baby, when in reality, he was the center of a war I didn't even know existed. The attack came just before dawn. No warning, no negotiation, just silence, followed by a system-wide blackout. Then alarms. Then glass shattering somewhere below us. Alaric moved instantly. Stay with him, he ordered, placing a small device in my hand. If anything happens, press this, Alaric. Stay. With him. And then he was gone. The penthouse felt too big after that, too empty, too exposed. Nico slept through it at first. But I didn't. Every sound outside the room made my body flinch. Every shadow felt like a decision I wasn't prepared to make. Then the door security system beeped. Once. Twice. A bypass code. My heart slammed into my chest. Corvin's voice came through the intercom. It's me. Relief hit so fast it almost made me dizzy. I opened the door. He stepped in. And I knew instantly something was wrong. He wasn't just tired. He was finished. You need to leave, he said. What? Why? They're inside the building. My blood ran cold. Who? Corvin hesitated. Then said, the people who own his birth. Before I could respond, Nico started crying again, but this time louder than ever. Like he knew. Like he was calling them. And then, a second voice came from the hallway. Calm, controlled, familiar. Alaric, except he wasn't alone. Behind him stood two men in tactical gear. And the moment I saw their insignia, I understood. This wasn't just private wealth. This wasn't just family secrets. This was sanctioned. Controlled. Protected. Alaric looked at me. And for the first time, there was something like apology in his eyes. It was never supposed to reach you, he said. My voice shook. What wasn't? He looked at Nico. And said the final truth like a verdict. He's not just my blood. He's the inheritance of an entire system that decides who leads the next generation of power. Silence. Corvin stepped forward. You told me she wouldn't be involved. Alaric didn't look away from me. I was wrong. That was the moment everything broke. Because I finally understood. I wasn't chosen randomly to hold him. I was placed near him. Watched. Tested. Used as a variable in something I was never meant to survive. And suddenly, Nico stopped crying. Completely. His eyes opened. And he looked at me. Like he recognized me. Like I mattered in whatever came next. The building shook again. Closer this time. Alaric stepped toward me. Listen carefully, he said. Whatever happens next, do not let go of him. Why me? I whispered. His answer was quiet. But it destroyed everything I thought I knew. Because you're the only one he trusts enough to survive with. A final explosion echoed from below. Lights flickered. And the world began to collapse into movement. Alaric gave one last look at Nico. Then at me. And said, now run. We didn't look back. Not when the doors opened. Not when the alarms screamed. Not when the truth finally caught up with us. Because in that moment, I wasn't a girl from a wealthy world playing at responsibility anymore. I wasn't the daughter of influence. I wasn't even someone trying to prove herself. I was the only shield between a child and a system that had decided his life without him. And as I ran through the chaos, holding Nico tighter than I ever thought I could hold anything, I realized something terrifying. The story didn't begin when I found him. It began the moment someone decided I would.